The Senate chamber trembles. Julius Caesar, drenched in crimson, staggers beneath the marble gaze of Pompey's statue. Knives gleam, echoing the last light of his empire. "Et tu, Brute?" he gasps, the betrayal heavier than steel. As his body collapses, time freezes, before the fall of a legend, before the birth of Rome's eternal myth. Long before the daggers, there was a child. Born on the 12th of July, 100 BC, in the heart of Rome, Gaius Julius Caesar cried beneath the shadow of Jupiter's temple. His family, ancient and noble, whispered that his lineage traced to Venus herself. Rome was restless. Ambition, corruption, and destiny were his cradle songs. In the bustling forum, young Caesar watched senators duel with words sharper than swords. His eyes burned with a hunger for greatness. He trained in rhetoric and law, mastering the voice that would one day command legions and nations. Even as he spoke his first speeches, whispers of his brilliance stirred the city. When Sulla seized Rome, Caesar's defiance was born. Ordered to divorce Cornelia, the daughter of his enemy, he refused, choosing love over fear. Soldiers hunted him through forests and villages. Ill and ragged, he hid among peasants, his nobility cloaked in mud, his will unbroken. Sulla's death freed Caesar. He returned to Rome a man hardened by exile, his charm now sharpened by survival. He adorned himself in elegance, his charisma disarming every foe. With calculated grace, he began climbing the ladder of power, slowly, deliberately, like a serpent coiling for the strike. Captured by pirates while sailing to Rhodes, Caesar turned captivity into command. When they mocked his ransom demand, he laughed and ordered them to double it. He read poetry to his captors, promising their deaths. True to his word, upon release, he raised a fleet, hunted them down, and crucified them all. In Rhodes, Caesar studied under Apollonius Molon, perfecting rhetoric and leadership. But Rome's turmoil called him back. He joined the army, serving in Asia and Cilicia, his courage legendary. He saved fellow soldiers under fire, earning the civic crown, the mark of valor. Back in Rome, Caesar allied with reformers who sought justice for the poor. His voice thundered in the Senate, demanding fairness against aristocratic cruelty. He became a hero to the people, feared by the elite. Rome began to whisper his name like a prophecy, Caesar. Appointed as the high priest of Jupiter, Caesar wore sacred robes, a symbol of divine favor. But politics twisted even the gods. When his wife died and his wealth dwindled, he traded sanctity for ambition. Religion had served its purpose. His path now led to empire, not eternity. Rome seethed with chaos, but Caesar saw opportunity. He mastered alliances, marrying political loyalty to charm. He befriended Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, its most feared general. The Triumvirate was born, a silent pact to rule the Republic. The world would soon tremble. Caesar rose as aedile, showering Rome with games and gladiatorial shows so magnificent they outshone all rivals. Streets blazed with torches, statues gleamed in his honor, and the people roared his name. Behind the spectacle, debts mounted. But Caesar understood popularity was the currency of power. As Pontifex Maximus, Caesar gained the city's spiritual heart. He dined with nobles by day, plotted with the people's tribunes by night. Every smile hid calculation, every gesture a step closer to control. Rome was his stage, and he its most dangerous actor. Assigned to govern Hispania Ulterior, Caesar unleashed his military brilliance. Against barbarian tribes and rebellious towns, he led from the front, sword in hand. Victories filled his coffers, and his men adored him. As his banners waved over Spain, he saw it clearly. Rome itself would one day bow to him. Back in Rome, Caesar wove destiny with cunning precision. He forged a secret alliance with Crassus and Pompey, the richest, the strongest, and the most ambitious. Together, they would dominate the Republic. The pact was sealed not with oaths, but with quiet, dangerous smiles. Elected consul in 59 BC, Caesar reigned over the Senate like a storm cloaked in silk. He passed laws that favored the poor and humiliated the aristocrats. His speeches carved through opposition like a blade through marble. The Republic trembled beneath his charm and fury. Granted governorship over Cisalpine and Transalpine Gaul, Caesar's eyes turned north to a land of forests, mist, and wild tribes. The Senate thought they had exiled him to obscurity, but they had, instead, unleashed his destiny. The eagle standards marched toward legend. Caesar's legions clashed with the Helvetii, fierce tribes migrating across Gaul. The battle was chaos and thunder, dust, cries, and blood. When dawn broke, tens of thousands lay defeated. Caesar wrote, "It is better to act than to be acted upon." His fame ignited across the world. Across the Rhine, the Germanic king Ariovistus challenged Rome's claim. Caesar marched fearlessly, his tactics flawless. The enemy fled before the disciplined might of the legions. Caesar had crossed the line from general to conqueror. Gaul now bent the knee to Rome's new master. The Belgae, proud and powerful, united to stop Caesar's advance. Entire forests burned as legions clashed in rivers of mud and fire. Caesar's genius outmaneuvered them all. By winter, Gaul was trembling. His reports to Rome, the commentaries, were not mere records, they were propaganda of immortality. To strike fear into hearts beyond the world's edge, Caesar built a bridge across the mighty Rhine in just 10 days. It was not conquest, it was a message. The world would know that no river, no tribe, no god could stop Rome's will. Then, just as swiftly, he tore it down. Beyond the mist of the northern seas lay a land the Romans called Britannia. Caesar, ever hungry for glory, sailed through storms to reach its unknown shores. Spears flew from the cliffs as wild warriors painted blue charged the surf. The legions formed ranks, shields gleaming under gray skies. History had crossed an ocean. The campaign was brutal. Rain, mud, and relentless skirmishes. Yet Caesar's resolve did not waver. Around campfires, his soldiers whispered of monsters and gods, but their general only smiled. He had touched the edge of the world and returned alive, his legend now stretching beyond mortal limits. While Caesar marched through Britain, rebellion erupted in Gaul. The tribes, weary of Roman rule, united under the young warrior Vercingetorix. The land burned as the revolt spread. Caesar returned with lightning fury, his vengeance swift, his discipline absolute. Avaricum stood proud, surrounded by swamps and rivers, a fortress thought impregnable. Caesar built siege towers, starving the city into surrender. When his army broke through, none were spared. The slaughter was merciless, yet in the silence after, Caesar wept. Even conquerors are haunted by victory. At Gergovia, Caesar met defeat. Vercingetorix's tactics lured the Romans into a deadly trap across the hills. Thousands fell as Caesar ordered a retreat, his calm masking deep fury. The taste of loss sharpened his purpose. Gaul would fall, or he would die upon its soil. Alesia became the crucible of empires. Surrounded by fortifications, Caesar trapped Vercingetorix and his massive host. The Romans built two walls, one to keep the enemy in, one to keep reinforcements out. Hunger, desperation, and steel decided the world's fate. When Alesia fell, the Gallic chieftain rode forth in silence. He dismounted before Caesar and dropped his sword at the conqueror's feet. The world stood still. Rome had devoured Gaul. Yet Caesar, gazing upon the defeated hero, knew he had conquered more than nations. He had conquered history. Returning to Rome, Caesar's chariots rolled through the city in grand procession. Captives, treasures, and banners of conquered tribes followed him. The people shouted his name like thunder. Above it all, he smiled, not with joy, but with the quiet certainty that his next war would be fought in Rome itself. Power breeds envy. Pompey, once Caesar's ally, now feared him. The Senate turned cold, whispering treason. Crassus lay dead in Parthia, the Triumvirate broken. Rome became a powder keg, two titans circling each other in silence, the Republic trembling between them. At the river Rubicon, Caesar halted his horse. Ahead lay Rome and treason. Behind him, loyalty and fate. "The die is cast," he whispered, and spurred his mount across the shallow waters. The civil war had begun, and with it, the death of the Republic. The river behind him, Caesar's legions thundered southward. Town after town opened its gates. Rome's defenders fled. The Senate panicked. Pompey retreated to Greece. Caesar entered the capital not as a conqueror of men, but of fear itself. In the empty streets, his footsteps echoed like destiny fulfilled. The Curia stood silent, its marble pillars echoing the absence of those who once defied him. Caesar ascended the dais and gazed upon the empty seats of senators who fled. "Rome is not the Senate," he said softly. "Rome is her people." With quill and command, he rebuilt the Republic, under his will alone. When Caesar pursued Pompey to Egypt, he found a kingdom torn by sibling war. Pompey was dead, murdered on the shore. Then came Cleopatra, veiled in silk, smuggled into Caesar's chamber, rolled in a carpet. Their eyes met, and an empire changed course forever. Love and ambition became one. Civil war raged in Alexandria. Caesar's forces, trapped and outnumbered, fought among the burning docks. Flames devoured scrolls of the library as smoke blackened the sky. Amid chaos, Caesar's strategy turned defeat into miracle. He burned the ships to save his men. Fire consumed history, but forged legend. With reinforcements from Asia, Caesar crushed the Egyptian army. The young King Ptolemy drowned in the Nile as his fleet sank beneath him. The war was done. Cleopatra's rule was secured, and from their union came a son, Caesarion, heir to two worlds. Caesar turned east to punish those who had backed Pompey. In Pontus, he faced Pharnaces, son of Mithridates. The battle was swift and absolute. Caesar sent word to Rome with three immortal words: Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Pompey regrouped in Greece, commanding vast legions and the Roman elite. Caesar landed with fewer men, short on supplies. At Dyrrhachium, his siege lines were shattered. For the first time, he tasted near defeat. But retreat was not surrender. His eyes burned with vengeance and patience. The plain of Pharsalus lay silent beneath a rising sun. Two Romes faced each other, Pompey's and Caesar's. Before battle, Caesar rode before his men, reminding them they fought not for conquest, but for their country. Strike not at Romans, he said, but at tyranny. Steel met steel beneath a storm of dust. Pompey's cavalry thundered forward, but Caesar's hidden cohorts struck from the flanks. The tide turned. Pompey's proud army collapsed into chaos. Victory was complete. On the blood-soaked field, Caesar mourned his enemies as brothers lost to ambition. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge, but found betrayal instead. Assassins met him on the shore. His death was silent, pitiful, unworthy of a Roman giant. When Caesar saw his rival's severed head, he turned away in grief. This was not how Rome should treat her sons, he whispered. Rome erupted in celebration. 4 triumphs in one: Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. Caesar rode through the city in robes of purple and gold, laurel crown upon his brow, prisoners in chains behind him. The crowds roared as flowers rained from balconies. Yet among the cheers lingered a whisper: "Is this a king?" Caesar took the title of Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. But his rule was not born of terror. It was order from chaos. He reformed debts, rebuilt the calendar, and gave land to veterans and citizens alike. Yet with every decree, the Senate's pride withered. Gratitude turned to fear. Caesar's reforms reached the heart of Rome. He rebuilt temples, planned libraries, expanded the Senate, and envisioned colonies for the poor. His mind worked not for the present, but for eternity. The Republic, once broken, gleamed anew, but its rebirth came under one man's shadow. During the festival of Lupercalia, Antony approached Caesar and offered a golden crown. The crowd held its breath. Caesar pushed it away, twice, and the people cheered. But behind their cheers lay confusion. Did he reject the crown, or merely postpone wearing it? Cleopatra arrived in Rome, her son Caesarion by her side. She lived in a villa across the Tiber, her beauty and influence sparking whispers of scandal. Caesar visited often, enthralled by her wit and grace. The city buzzed with rumors. Rome's ruler might yet become Egypt's king. As Caesar's power grew, senators plotted in silence. Cassius spoke of liberty, Brutus of duty. Marble corridors echoed with conspiratorial footsteps. They told themselves they were saving Rome, but in truth, they were saving their pride. One night, Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, awoke in terror. She had dreamed of his statue bleeding, of daggers and cries in the Forum. She begged him not to go to the Senate that morning. Caesar smiled gently, dismissing omens as superstition. Destiny, he said, cannot be delayed by dreams. The morning was clear, the city alive with murmurs. As Caesar walked through the streets, a soothsayer cried out, "Beware the Ides of March!" Caesar laughed, brushing the warning aside. Around him, senators smiled, too kindly. Beneath their togas, steel glinted unseen. In the theater of Pompeii, senators gathered. Caesar entered, radiant in white robes, greeted by bows and murmured respect. He ascended the steps to take his seat. Suddenly, a hand tugged his toga, then another. The circle closed around him. Blades flashed. The Republic's heart stopped beating. Steel pierced flesh. Blood stained marble. Caesar turned to see Brutus among the assassins, his friend, his son in spirit. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. "Et tu, Brute?" he whispered, not in anger, but heartbreak. Then he fell, the laurel crown tumbling from his head, the statue of Pompey watching coldly above. The theater of Pompeii fell silent. Senators fled in terror, daggers clattering on the floor. Caesar's body lay alone, his blood tracing rivers across the marble tiles. The conspirators shouted, "Liberty!" but their voices trembled. In killing a man, they had awakened a legend. The city trembled when the news spread. Doors closed, temples filled with prayers, and mothers clutched their children. Some rejoiced, most wept. Caesar had been a tyrant to some, a savior to others, but to all he had been Rome's beating heart, and now that heart had stopped. Brutus and Cassius stood before the people, blood still on their hands, declaring freedom restored. Yet the crowd's cheers were hollow. The conspirators expected gratitude, but found only confusion and dread. Liberty without Caesar felt like emptiness. When Caesar's body was brought home, Calpurnia collapsed at his side. She kissed his wounds and whispered prayers through tears. Outside, thousands gathered in silence, bearing flowers and torches. Rome had not lost a dictator. It had lost its father. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend, took the reins of power. Cunning and fierce, he hid his fury beneath calm words. He pretended to honor the Senate while plotting vengeance. His eyes, once loyal to Caesar, now burned with purpose, to avenge him and to seize his mantle. The Forum overflowed. Antony stood before the people beside Caesar's shrouded body. His voice trembled with grief and fury. He read aloud the will. Caesar had left money to every citizen. The crowd gasped, then roared. The dead had given more than the living. Antony's voice grew thunderous. He held up Caesar's blood-stained cloak, showing every wound. "This was the most unkindest cut of all," he cried, pointing to Brutus's mark. The crowd broke into rage. Torches flared. Rome itself seemed to burn with vengeance. Riot consumed the city. The mob dragged furniture into the streets, burning the houses of the conspirators. Brutus and Cassius fled through the night, shadows pursued by firelight. Caesar's pyre became a beacon of wrath that set the Republic ablaze. In the skies above Rome, a comet appeared, a bright flame tearing across the heavens. The people said it was Caesar's soul ascending to the gods. Temples rang with hymns, and altars burned anew. Julius Caesar had become not just man, but divine. From the ashes rose a new name, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son and heir. Barely a man, yet calm, cunning, and born of destiny. He swore to avenge his father and claim his legacy. The world had lost Caesar the mortal, but would soon kneel before Caesar's successor. Octavian arrived in Rome quietly, bearing Caesar's name and his will. The Senate dismissed him as a boy, yet he carried himself with a calm authority that unsettled even the veterans of war. He visited the site where his adoptive father fell and swore an oath. Rome would never forget Caesar's glory or his murderers. Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian met in secret near the river Lavinius. The three men, bound by ambition and revenge, formed the Second Triumvirate. They divided the Roman world between them, but each knew betrayal lurked beneath the oaths. Caesar's spirit seemed to hover, watching. The triumvirs unleashed terror to fund their vengeance. Lists of the condemned were nailed to the forum walls, names of senators, nobles, and even old friends. Blood returned to Rome's streets as assassins hunted those marked for death. Mercy had no place in Caesar's revenge. Among the names was Cicero, the great orator who once defended the Republic. He fled through olive groves, but was captured. As the blade fell, he whispered, "Caesar's vengeance devours us all." His severed head was displayed in the Forum, a grim warning to Rome. Antony and Octavian gathered Caesar's legions to hunt down Brutus and Cassius. Across the Adriatic, banners bearing the eagle and laurel fluttered in the wind. The veterans marched not merely for power, but for their fallen general, Julius Caesar, whose ghost led them to vengeance. The plains of Philippi shook beneath the tramp of tens of thousands. Brutus and Cassius commanded the forces of the Republic. Antony and Octavian led the avengers of Caesar. Spears glinted like stars, and dust rose like a storm cloud over Macedonia. As the battle raged, Cassius watched from a distant hill. Seeing his men falter, he believed all was lost. He fell upon his own sword, held by a loyal slave. His final breath carried regret, not for Caesar's death, but for the fate of Rome. Brutus fought valiantly, his heart heavy with guilt. When defeat was certain, he too chose death over capture. He whispered, "Caesar, now be still. I kill not thee with half so good a will." In that moment, the Republic died with him. Antony and Octavian stood over the battlefield of Philippi, now silent except for crows. "Thus ends the rule of the Senate," Antony said. Octavian remained silent, gazing eastward. In the smoke and blood, both men saw Caesar's shadow, smiling faintly from the heavens. Peace returned, but only in name. Antony claimed the East and Egypt. Octavian held Rome. Both men toasted to Caesar's memory, but in their hearts ambition burned anew. The eagle of Rome had two heads now, and one would soon devour the other. In the glittering halls of Alexandria, Cleopatra awaited Antony's arrival. Draped in gold and jewels, she sat upon her throne, her gaze as sharp as the edge of ambition. When Antony entered, the air itself seemed to bow. The Queen of Egypt had found her match in Caesar's fiercest general. Their meeting erupted into celebration. Gold cups overflowed, music filled the air, and perfumes of myrrh and rose drifted like dreams. Cleopatra and Antony laughed together beneath jeweled canopies, toasting to love and power. The world had two suns now, and both burned brightly. Far away in Rome, Octavian listened to news from Egypt with icy calm. He read letters of Antony's devotion to Cleopatra and smiled thinly. "He forgets himself," Octavian murmured. "He forgets Caesar's Rome." Already, he began shaping the narrative that would destroy his rival. Cleopatra dreamed of ruling a united East and West beside Antony. She presented him with a golden crown, calling him the new Dionysus. Together, they paraded through Alexandria as living gods. Yet behind the cheers, whispers spread. Antony had betrayed Rome for a queen's embrace. The Senate erupted with fury. Octavian stood before them holding Antony's will, stolen from the Vestal virgins. It declared his desire to be buried in Alexandria, beside Cleopatra. The senators gasped. Rome's heart belonged to Egypt. Octavian's war had found its cause. Rome declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. Octavian's propaganda painted her as the serpent queen who sought to enslave Rome's sons. Across the Mediterranean, fleets gathered under rival banners. The ghost of Caesar seemed to guide both sides toward their fateful clash. On the waters of Actium, fire and wind consumed the sea. Cleopatra's ships blazed as Octavian's fleet encircled them. Antony fought valiantly until he saw Cleopatra's flagship fleeing. Love overcame duty. He followed her into retreat, and with that, the war was lost. In Alexandria, Antony faced the end. Surrounded by defeat and betrayal, he fell upon his own sword. Dying in Cleopatra's arms, he whispered, "Rome was not enough for us." His blood stained the marble floor, a crimson echo of Caesar's final hour. Octavian entered Alexandria victorious. Cleopatra, proud to the end, refused to be paraded in chains. Draped in royal robes, she pressed an asp to her breast. As the venom took her, she whispered, "I come to thee, my Caesar." Her death marked the twilight of both love and empire. Octavian stood upon the steps of the Alexandrian palace, gazing toward the rising sun. He had avenged Caesar, crushed his rivals, and conquered the world. Rome would never again be ruled by many. The Republic was gone, the empire had begun, and Caesar lived on through him. Octavian returned to Rome not as a conqueror, but as a savior. The Senate and the people welcomed him with cheers that shook the forum. They called him Princeps, the first citizen. Yet behind his calm eyes lay a dream far greater, to fulfill Caesar's vision of eternal order. In the quiet halls of his villa, Octavian gazed at Caesar's bust. "You gave Rome greatness," he whispered. "I shall give it eternity." He studied Caesar's writings, his reforms, his ambition. Each page seemed to breathe, reminding him that empires are built not by swords alone, but by vision. The Senate, weary of civil war, crowned Octavian with new honors. They named him Augustus, the revered one. In that single act, the Republic's heartbeat faded forever. The man who bore Caesar's name now became more than mortal. He became Rome itself. Octavian commissioned a temple to his adoptive father, the Divus Julius. On its altar, the people offered incense and prayers. The comet that once blazed across the heavens became Caesar's star, his eternal symbol. Rome now worshipped its first god. Augustus brought peace to a world that had forgotten it. Roads stretched from Britain to Syria. Aqueducts carried life to the cities, and the legions guarded every frontier beneath Caesar's eagle. The world exhaled. Rome had become the sun around which all revolved. In marble halls, Augustus's family dined under frescoes of Caesar's triumphs. He looked upon his adopted sons and whispered, "You will rule where he dreamed." Yet behind every banquet's laughter echoed the silence of Caesar's death, a reminder that power never rests without cost. New laws replaced old freedoms. Augustus ruled through persuasion rather than force, but none dared oppose him. The Senate bowed, the people obeyed, and Caesar's system of governance, the unity of order and glory, became Rome's eternal creed. Temples across the empire now bore Caesar's name beside that of Augustus. In distant provinces, peasants prayed to statues of the two together, the Father divine, the Son eternal. Through faith and empire, Julius Caesar lived again in every marble face. In his old age, Augustus wrote of the journey from chaos to peace. "All I have done," he wrote, "was to complete what Caesar began." He saw himself not as a conqueror, but as a gardener, tending the tree his father had planted. The seed of Caesar had become the forest of civilization. As Augustus lay dying, he asked, "Have I played my part well?" Then, smiling faintly, he whispered, "If so, applaud." The torch passed from his hand to history itself. In that moment, Julius Caesar's dream was complete. Rome would endure for 1,000 years, his spirit forever burning within it. Years passed, and emperors rose under Caesar's name. His statues stood in every forum, his laws guided every city. Though his body had turned to dust, his vision breathed in every road, every legion, every heartbeat of Rome. Caesar had become the soul of civilization itself. Philosophers and poets spoke his name with awe. He shaped destiny, they said. In the Senate, orators invoked his memory to inspire courage and wisdom. The voice that once commanded armies now guided minds, a whisper carried across centuries of thought and power. Centuries later, barbarians breached the eternal city. Flames rose where marble once shone. Yet even as Rome fell, a soldier carved Caesar's name into a broken column. "Rome may burn," he said, "but Caesar will never die." The empire's ashes carried his memory forward. In medieval castles, monarchs studied Caesar's campaigns, seeing in him the blueprint of rule. His commentaries on the Gallic War became scripture for power. His name a talisman for ambition. Every crown in Europe carried a fragment of his laurel. Artists and thinkers of the Renaissance revived Caesar's glory. Michelangelo painted him as divine strength. Shakespeare wrote his tragedy with trembling pen, and poets called him the eternal conqueror. Through art, Caesar rose again, a god reborn in human genius. In later centuries, Napoleon stood before a statue of Caesar and whispered, "I follow your path." Kings and conquerors across time saw in him their reflection, his ambition their inheritance. Yet none could escape his shadow. Caesar had become the measure of greatness itself. In modern republics, leaders quoted Caesar not as a tyrant, but as a lesson. His brilliance inspired, his fall warned. In the halls of democracy, his ghost lingered, a reminder that power and virtue must walk together, lest the dagger find its mark again. The Tiber flowed as it always had, past ruins and domes, beneath bridges older than memory. Tourists walked where Caesar once stood, whispering his name in a dozen tongues. Rome had changed, but its spirit, born in him, still shimmered in the air like sacred dust. From marble to ink, from empire to legend, Julius Caesar lived beyond time. His name became a symbol. Kaiser, Tsar, Caesar, echoes across languages, each one claiming kinship with the man who refused to die. He was no longer a person, but an idea eternal as the stars. At the edge of eternity, Caesar stands upon a golden plain of memory, watching empires rise and fall like waves. He smiles, not with pride, but with peace. "I was not made to live forever," he whispers, "yet I have." The world turns beneath him, still beating to his name.